The rental car smelled like artificial pine and stale coffee, but I barely noticed. My hands gripped the steering wheel as I turned onto Maple Ridge Drive, and my heart started hammering against my ribs. It had been 3 years since I'd driven down this street. 3 years since I'd seen the white Colonial with the black shutters that my late husband Tom and I had bought back in 1985. 3 years since I'd seen my daughter Rebecca. The house looked different. The azaleas I'd planted were overgrown and wild, consuming the front porch railing. The paint was peeling near the garage door. Tom would have been heartbroken to see it like this. But Tom wasn't here anymore, and that was precisely why I was pulling into the driveway at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday morning without calling ahead. I cut the engine and sat there for a moment, staring at the front door. My phone buzzed in my purse. Another text from my son Daniel in Seattle, asking if I'd arrived safely. I told him not to worry, that I just needed to check on Rebecca, that everything would be fine, but the knot in my stomach told a different story. The last time I'd spoken to Rebecca was 6 weeks ago. She'd called me at the assisted living facility in Phoenix, where I'd been staying near Tom's sister while he received treatment for his cancer. The conversation had been brief, strained. She'd said everything was fine, that Mark was taking good care of her, that I shouldn't worry about flying back for a visit. Her voice had sounded thin, stretched tight like a wire about to snap. I'd asked if she was sleeping enough, eating properly. She'd laughed, but it wasn't her real laugh. It was the laugh she'd used as a teenager when she was hiding something. That was 6 weeks ago. Since then, my calls went straight to voicemail. My texts received one-word responses hours later. Fine. Busy. Later. Tom died 4 weeks ago. Rebecca didn't come to the funeral. She'd sent flowers with a card that read, "So sorry, Mom. Mark isn't feeling well. Can't travel. Love you." The handwriting wasn't hers. I'd stared at that card for 3 days straight, while Tom's sister Ruth fussed over funeral arrangements and casseroles and sympathy cards. When I told Ruth I was flying back to Connecticut to see Rebecca, she'd grabbed my hand across the kitchen table. "Margaret," she'd said, using my full name, the way she only did when she was serious, "something's not right. A daughter doesn't miss her father's funeral unless something is very wrong." She was right. I'd known it in my bones, the way mothers know things. So here I was, jet-lagged and grief-worn, sitting in a rental car in my own driveway, about to walk into my own house like a stranger. I grabbed my purse and got out of the car. The October air was crisp, carrying the smell of wood smoke from someone's fireplace. Leaves crunched under my shoes as I walked up the front path. I'd kept my key to the house on my keychain all these years, right next to the key to Tom's old truck that we'd sold before moving to Phoenix. Old habits. The key slid into the lock, and I pushed the door open. The smell hit me first, not the familiar scent of Rebecca's lavender sachets or the lemon polish she used on the hardwood floors. This was different. Cooking grease. Unwashed laundry, something sour and neglected. The entryway was cluttered with shoes, at least a dozen pairs scattered across the floor. Men's work boots, expensive women's heels, children's sneakers. None of them were Rebecca's. I stepped inside and closed the door quietly behind me. Voices drifted from the kitchen, multiple voices, laughter, the clatter of dishes. I moved down the hallway, my footsteps silent on the runner rug that Rebecca and I had picked out at HomeGoods years ago. It was stained now. Dark spots that looked like they'd never been cleaned. The kitchen was full of people I didn't recognize. A heavy-set woman in her 50s stood at the stove, stirring something in my good Dutch oven. 2 children, maybe 7 and 9 years old, sat at the breakfast bar with tablets in front of them, some cartoon playing at full volume. A man in his 30s lounged at my kitchen table, scrolling through his phone, his feet propped up on the chair where Tom used to sit. None of them noticed me standing in the doorway. "Excuse me," I said, my voice cutting through the noise like a knife. The woman at the stove whirled around, spatula raised like a weapon. The children looked up from their screens. The man at the table slowly lowered his phone, his face shifting from surprise to something harder, more defensive. "Who are you?" the woman demanded. "How did you get in here?" I felt a strange calm settle over me. The kind of calm that comes when you realize your worst fears are being confirmed right in front of you. I'm Margaret Torres. This is my house. The more relevant question is, who are you? The woman's face flushed red. This is Mark's house. I'm his sister, Diane. This is my husband, Roger, and our kids. Mark said we could stay here as long as we needed. If you're one of Rebecca's friends, you need to leave before I call the police. Where is Rebecca? I kept my voice level, but my hands were shaking. I clasped them together in front of me. She's working, Diane said, turning back to the stove dismissively. She'll be home later. You can talk to Mark if you have questions. He's upstairs in his office. His office? Mark had an office upstairs. In my house. In the room that used to be Rebecca's childhood bedroom. With her art supplies and the window seat where she used to read. I didn't bother responding to Diane. I walked past the kitchen. Past the cluttered dining room where I could see more belongings that didn't belong to my daughter. Mail and packages and someone's laptop on the table Tom and I had bought at an estate sale in Motngin Chincham Chinmui High. The stairs creaked as I climbed them. I could hear a television playing from the master bedroom. More voices, more strangers in my house. I passed the bathroom and saw wet towels on the floor, toothbrushes scattered across the counter, none of Rebecca's things visible. Mark's voice came from Rebecca's old room, loud and jovial. Yeah, man, the setup is perfect. My sister and her family moved in last month. My parents are taking the master. Rebecca doesn't mind. She knows family comes first. I pushed the door open without knocking. Mark sat at a desk we'd never owned, facing 3 large computer monitors. He was heavier than I remembered, his hair thinning on top. He spun around in his expensive gaming chair, his expression shifting from annoyance to something like fear when he saw me. Margaret, he said, standing up quickly. We weren't expecting you. Rebecca didn't mention you were coming. I'm sure she didn't, since she didn't know. I looked around the room. Rebecca's art desk was gone. Her bookshelf was gone. Everything that had been hers was gone, replaced with Mark's computers and gaming equipment and a mini fridge in the corner. Where is my daughter, Mark? She's at work. She works the morning shift at the diner now, helps pay the bills. Things have been tight since your husband got sick and you moved away. His tone was casual, almost friendly, but there was an edge underneath it. The diner? Rebecca had a master's degree in library science. The last I knew, she was an assistant director at the public library downtown. What happened to her job at the library? Mark shrugged. Budget cuts. She was laid off about a year ago. It's been rough. You know, that's why I suggested my family come stay with us, help with expenses. We're all pitching in. Something about the way he said it didn't ring true. I'd learned to read people over my 6 decades of life, learned to spot the small tells that meant someone wasn't being honest. Mark's eyes shifted to the left when he spoke. His hand moved to scratch his neck, a nervous gesture. I'd like to see Rebecca, I said. Sure. She gets off at 3. You can wait here if you want, or come back later. He was already turning back to his computer, dismissing me. I'll wait. I didn't move from the doorway. Downstairs. In the living room. Which I assume your parents haven't taken over yet. His jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. I turned and walked downstairs, my mind racing. Something was very, very wrong here. Rebecca wouldn't have quit her library job without telling me. She'd worked too hard for that position, had been so proud when she got it, and living with Mark's entire extended family, Rebecca was an introvert, someone who needed quiet and space. This house full of strangers would be her nightmare. The living room was relatively untouched, though someone's laundry was piled on the couch. I moved it aside and sat down, pulling out my phone. My hands were still shaking as I texted Daniel. I'm at the house. Something is wrong. Call you later. His response came immediately. Do you need me to fly out there? Not yet. Let me figure out what's happening. I sat there for 6 hours. Diane brought her children through several times, glaring at me each time but saying nothing. Mark came down once, grabbed something from the kitchen, and went back upstairs without acknowledging me. An older couple, presumably Mark's parents, came home around 2 o'clock, loaded with shopping bags. They stopped short when they saw me. Who's this? The man asked Diane, jerking his thumb in my direction. Rebecca's mother, Diane said, her voice dripping with disdain. She let herself in, said it's her house. The man, Mark's father, I assumed, laughed. Rebecca's mother? The one who abandoned her daughter to go play nurse in Arizona? That's rich. I stood up, my calm finally cracking. I did not abandon my daughter. I took care of my dying husband, and this is my house. My name is on the deed. Now someone is going to explain to me what's happening here before I call the police myself. Call them, Mark's father said, settling into the recliner like he owned it. We have permission to be here. Mark's our son. This is his house now. Rebecca signed it over to him 6 months ago when she couldn't keep up with the mortgage payments after you left. The words hit me like a physical blow. That's impossible. There is no mortgage. My husband and I paid off this house 15 years ago. Well, there is one now, he said, smirking. A big one. Ask your daughter about it when she gets home from slinging hash at the diner. I sat back down, my legs suddenly weak. Something was terribly, terribly wrong, but before I could process it, I heard a car in the driveway. A door slammed. Footsteps on the front walk, slow and heavy. The door opened, and my daughter walked in. I barely recognized her. Rebecca had always been thin, but now she was gaunt, her collarbones protruding above the collar of her grease-stained uniform. Her hair, once long and dark and shiny, was pulled back in a messy bun, streaked with premature gray. She had dark circles under her eyes that looked like bruises. She was 34 years old but looked 50. She froze when she saw me. Her work bag slipped from her hand and hit the floor with a dull thud. Mom? Her voice was barely a whisper. I stood up and took a step toward her, but she flinched. Actually flinched, like she expected me to hit her. That's when I knew. That's when I understood with absolute clarity that something terrible had been happening to my daughter, and I'd been 1,000 miles away while it happened. Hello, baby, I said softly, using the nickname I hadn't used since she was small. I think we need to talk. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. She looked at Mark's family scattered around the living room, then back at me. I can't, she whispered. Not here. Then let's go somewhere else. My rental car is outside. We can drive somewhere, just you and me. She has to make dinner, Diane called from the kitchen. We're hungry. I turned to face her, and whatever expression was on my face made her take a step back. My daughter is leaving with me. Now. Make your own dinner. Mark appeared at the top of the stairs. Rebecca, you don't have to go anywhere. Your mother can't just show up and start making demands. I'm not making demands. I'm inviting my daughter to have a conversation with me, in private. I held out my hand to Rebecca. Please, honey, come with me. For a long moment, Rebecca didn't move. She looked at Mark, then at me, then down at her feet. When she finally took my hand, it was ice cold and trembling. I need to change first, she said quietly. No, I said firmly. Right now. We're leaving right now. I didn't give anyone time to object. I kept hold of Rebecca's hand and walked her out the front door, down the path, and into the passenger seat of the rental car. Mark followed us onto the porch, shouting something about legal rights and family privacy, but I ignored him. I got in the driver's seat, started the engine, and pulled out of the driveway. Rebecca started crying before we reached the end of the street. Not quiet tears, but great gasping sobs that shook her whole body. I drove to the parking lot of the Methodist church 2 blocks away, the same church where we'd gone when Rebecca was in Sunday school. I parked under a maple tree, turned off the engine, and pulled my daughter into my arms. She cried for 20 minutes while I held her and stroked her hair and whispered that she was safe, that I was here, that everything would be okay. When the sobs finally subsided into hiccups, I pulled back and looked at her. Tell me, I said. Tell me everything. And she did. The story came out in broken pieces, but I put them together like a horrible puzzle. It started 2 months after Tom and I moved to Phoenix. Mark lost his job in sales. He told Rebecca it was temporary, that he'd find something else soon. But months passed, and he didn't look for work. He stayed home, played video games, told Rebecca she needed to be more supportive, less nagging. When Rebecca suggested he apply for unemployment, he exploded, accused her of not believing in him, of being just like his critical mother. Then his sister Diane's husband lost his job. Mark invited them to stay just for a few weeks. The weeks turned into months. Mark's parents retired and their condo flooded. Mark invited them too. Suddenly the house was full, and everyone expected Rebecca to cook, clean, do laundry, manage everything. "I tried to tell you," Rebecca whispered. "When Dad got sick, I tried to say something. But Mark was always there when you called. He'd stand next to me, watching. And I thought, your husband is dying, Mom. You don't need my problems too." My heart shattered into pieces. She told me about the second mortgage. Mark had forged her signature on the paperwork, told her afterwards that they needed the money, that she owed it to him to help his family. When she threatened to report him, he told her she was the one who'd approved it, that it was her word against his, that his whole family would testify that she'd signed willingly. She told me about quitting the library job. Except she hadn't quit. Mark's mother had called her supervisor, pretending to be Rebecca, and said Rebecca was leaving for personal reasons. By the time Rebecca found out, the position had been filled. With a master's degree and a sudden resignation on her record, she couldn't find another library position. The diner was all she could get. She told me about the smaller things, the daily degradations. Sleeping on an air mattress in the laundry room because every bedroom was occupied, eating last, after everyone else had been served, being screamed at if dinner wasn't ready on time, if the house wasn't clean enough, if she forgot to buy someone's preferred brand of cereal. "Why didn't you leave?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. I'd read enough stories, heard enough from friends. It's never as simple as just leaving. "Where would I go?" She looked at me with hollow eyes. "I have no money. He watches every penny I make. I don't have friends anymore. He made sure of that, said they were turning me against him. And the house, Mom, he said the house was his now. That I'd signed it over. I didn't know if that was legal or not. I didn't know anything anymore." I held her face in my hands. "Listen to me. That house is not his. Your father and I never put it in your name or Mark's name. It's still in my name, in our family trust. Mark can't sign it away because it was never his to sign. Do you understand?" Hope flickered in her eyes for the first time. "But the mortgage, fraud. We'll deal with it. But baby, the house is mine. Which means tomorrow morning, I'm gonna walk back into that house and I'm gonna tell every single one of them to get out. They won't leave. Mark will say, I don't care what Mark says. I have the original deed, the trust documents, everything. It's all in my safe deposit box at the bank. And tomorrow, we're going to get it. And then we're going to fix this." We sat in that church parking lot until the sun started to set. Rebecca told me everything 3 years of abuse condensed into 2 hours of conversation. With each word, I felt my grief over Tom transform into something harder, sharper, fury. I took Rebecca to a hotel near the highway, checked us into a double room, ordered room service because I'd be damned if my daughter was going to cook anything today. While she showered, I called Daniel and told him everything. Then I called my lawyer. Jerry Stevenson had handled Tom's will and our estate planning for 20 years. When I told him what had happened, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Margaret," he finally said, "what they've done to her is illegal on about 15 different levels. The forged mortgage alone is bank fraud. We can fix this, but it's going to get ugly." "Good," I said. "I want it to get ugly." The next morning, I woke up before dawn. Rebecca was still sleeping, curled up under the covers like she used to do as a child. I left her a note saying I'd be back by 9, and I drove to the bank as soon as it opened. The safe deposit box contained everything I needed. The original deed, in mine and Tom's names. The trust documents, establishing that Rebecca was the beneficiary, but the house itself remained in trust ownership until my death. Title insurance records. Property tax receipts going back 15 years, all paid by me from my account. I made copies of everything at the bank's business center. Then I called Jerry again. "I'm going to the house," I told him. "I'm serving them all with eviction notices. Can you have those drawn up by this afternoon?" "Margaret, you need to be careful. If this Mark is as unstable as you say." "I'm 63 years old, Jerry. I've survived raising teenagers, a husband's cancer, and my mother-in-law. I can handle Mark. At least take the police with you for the eviction." "Oh, I intend to." I drove to the police station next. explained the situation to the desk sergeant, showed him the documents, told him I needed an officer to accompany me while I served eviction notices to squatters in my property. He was skeptical at first, but the paperwork was undeniable. He sent Officer Morrison, a woman about Rebecca's age with kind eyes and no-nonsense posture. "Just so I'm clear," she said as we drove back to the house, "you own this property outright. These people have no legal right to be there, and your daughter has been living there under duress?" "That's correct." "And the husband forged documents to take out a mortgage on a house he doesn't own?" "Yes." She shook her head. "This is going to be a mess. But ma'am, I'm glad you came home." We pulled up to the house at 10 a.m. Officer Morrison's patrol car in the driveway sent a clear message. Diane's face appeared in the window, then vanished. Mark came to the door before I could knock. He was trying to look confident, but I could see the fear in his eyes when he spotted the police officer. "Can I help you?" His voice was tight. "I'm here to inform you that you and your entire family have 24 hours to vacate this property," I said calmly. "This house is owned by me, held in a family trust. You have no legal claim to it. Officer Morrison is here to witness that I've delivered this notice and to ensure that this process goes smoothly." "You can't do this," Mark sputtered. Rebecca signed nothing. She had no authority to sign anything. The house was never hers to give you. I handed him the eviction notice. Jerry had emailed me to print at the hotel. "You have until 10 a.m. tomorrow. Take your family and leave." "Where are we supposed to go?" Diane had appeared behind Mark, her children clinging to her. I felt a moment of sympathy for the children, but only a moment. "That's not my concern. You came here without my permission. You exploited my daughter. You leave by tomorrow, or I'll have the sheriff remove you." "The mortgage," Mark started, "is fraudulent. I never authorized it, and the house was never in your name to borrow against. I'll be reporting it to the bank and to the police fraud division this afternoon. If you took out that mortgage, Mark, I suggest you get a good lawyer." His face went white. Officer Morrison stepped forward. "Mr. Torres, I strongly suggest you cooperate. What Miss Margaret is describing constitutes fraud, forgery, and possibly elder abuse by exploitation. You really don't want to make this worse." "Elder abuse? Rebecca's mother isn't elderly. Her daughter is the victim, and you used her mother's property without permission. Trust me, you don't want to test this." Officer Morrison's hand rested casually on her belt, near her radio. 24 hours. Cooperate. Or things get much more complicated for you." We left them standing in the doorway. As we walked back to our cars, Officer Morrison turned to me. "That took guts. Most people would have just called us and stayed away. That's my daughter's home. My home. I'm not staying away anymore." I picked Rebecca up from the hotel at noon. She was terrified to go back, but I insisted, "You need to see this, baby. You need to see that they have no power over you anymore." When we pulled up, the moving had already started. A U-Haul truck sat in the driveway. Mark's father was loading boxes, his face red with exertion and anger. Diane was herding her children into a minivan, shooting daggers at us with her eyes. Rebecca gripped my hand as we walked up the front path. "They're really leaving?" "They're really leaving." Mark appeared in the doorway, a box in his arms. When he saw Rebecca, his expression shifted, trying to soften. "Becca, baby, you don't have to do this. We can work this out. It's your mother who's being unreasonable." "Her name is Rebecca," I said coldly. "And you're done talking to her. Finish packing and get out." "Rebecca," he tried again, ignoring me. "We're married. This is between us. Don't let your mother—" "I want a divorce," Rebecca said. Her voice was quiet but steady. "I'm filing next week." The box slipped from Mark's hands and hit the porch with a crash. "You can't be serious." "Deadly serious." She squeezed my hand tighter. "And I'm getting a restraining order, so you need to stay away from me." "You can't do this." Now the mask was completely off, the rage visible. "After everything I've done for you? I gave you a home when your mother abandoned you. You gave her nothing," I said. "And she's done. We're done. You have 19 hours left. I suggest you use them." We walked into the house, leaving him standing there. The place was chaos, boxes everywhere, furniture being moved, Mark's family scrambling. But underneath the chaos, I could already see our home starting to reappear. Rebecca's hand in mine was still shaking, but she was standing taller. Over the next 3 weeks, we reclaimed everything. Jerry filed a fraud report with the bank about the forged mortgage. Turned out Mark had a history of this, 2 credit cards in his sister's name, a car loan using his father's information. The district attorney was very interested. Rebecca filed for divorce and a restraining order, both granted immediately when she showed the judge photos of the laundry room where she'd been sleeping, the timeline of financial abuse, the forged documents. The house slowly became ours again. We cleaned out every room, repainted Rebecca's old bedroom, replaced the stained carpets. Rebecca quit the diner and started applying for library positions again. With a proper reference from her former supervisor, who was horrified to learn about the fraudulent resignation call, and my support, she landed an interview at the University Library in New Haven. She got the job, started 3 weeks later. One evening in November, we sat in the living room together. Rebecca was on the couch with a book, her hair clean and shining again, her face slowly regaining color and life. I was in Tom's old chair with my knitting, something I'd taken up again since coming home. "Mom?" Rebecca said softly. "Yes, baby? Thank you for coming home. Thank you for not believing him when he said I was fine." I set down my knitting and looked at my daughter. "I will always come home for you. Always. I'm sorry I wasn't here sooner. You were taking care of Dad. You couldn't have known. But I should have. I'm your mother. I should have known something was wrong." She got up and came to sit on the arm of my chair, leaning her head against mine the way she used to do when she was small. "You're here now. That's what matters." We sat like that for a long time, in the house that was finally, truly ours again. Outside, the November wind rattled the windows, but inside we were warm and safe and together. Tom's photo smiled at us from the mantel. I like to think he was proud of us, proud of how we'd fought back, how we'd reclaimed what was ours. Rebecca still has hard days. Nightmares. Moments when she flinches at loud noises or unexpected movements. We're working through it together. She's in therapy now, processing 3 years of abuse. I go with her sometimes,